Alright, shalom. Welcome to Lexicon of GMS. Today I just want to go through a brief lesson dealing with the Hebrew alphabet. Just going to go through the Lashawan Qadash, which is the ancient Hebrew or the pure language, and I want to go through these letters. You brothers by now should know that there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet on the Lashawan Qadash, which is the ancient Hebrew. And this is more so of a more like a beginner's lesson. That's for brothers that are just coming into this thing and just learning about the alphabet in the Hebrew. Alright, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna start off from the top. Like I said, there's 22 characters or 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, beginning with A. This character here is a A, as you see here, the pronunciation A. And the A, when the Lord came to Adam, he had Adam name everything. So what he did was he named the cattle Aleph. Now the term or the word Aleph means cattle, or it also equals 1,000. Okay, so everything that Adam had back then, he named everything. So that's where you get the language from. From him naming these different things. Mainly the animals and such. So some of them characters carried over into the language from what Adam called the cattle or the fruit or whatever the case it was back then, that he was naming. So the Hebrew character A comes from the word Aleph, which means cattle or 1,000. And I have here the logo or the emblem of American Steakhouse. And if you take this A and you turn the point down, if you turn the point down, you'll see what you have here in the middle, which is a cattle. You have the horns coming out, the ears, and then the face of the cattle. That's what the eye represents, cattle. Okay, and it also represents the number 1,000. Alright, and then each Hebrew character has a similar or the same characteristics to it. So I'm just gonna go through the letters, and some of them don't have meanings because some of their stuff was lost. So I'm just gonna go through these letters to show you brothers what the letters are, how to pronounce them, and the ones that have it, what they mean. Okay, the second letter is Ba, as you can see here, Ba, and that comes from the Hebrew word Bayath, which means house. Alright, the next letter is Ga, as you can see here, Ga, which comes from the Hebrew word Gamal, which means camel. Alright, the next letter is the Da, right, and it comes from the Hebrew, as you can see here, the pronunciation Da, it comes from the Hebrew word Dalath, which means door. And then if you look here, this is the house, Bayath, and then here you have Dalath, which is door, and you can see that that's the door there, okay, to the house. Alright, like I said, each one of these, if you I don't have a blackboard, so I can't draw them out to show you, but if you draw them out, you can see, it gives you a little bit more clear understanding of what is meant by what the letter signifies, in the language. Just like this one here for the A for Aleph, as you can see, it's like a cattle head. Okay, if you turn the point down. All right. Now the next word or the next letter is Ha. That's a pronunciation Ha, but there's no meaning for it, right now, because they didn't have it. Alright, the next letter Wa, this pronunciation Wa, is Wawa or hook. Okay, the next letter is Za, which looks more like a Z. This is the Moabite stone. This is the Moabite stone font. So that's how they have it. So the Za is a little more like a Z. So that's a Za, which you have the Hebrew word Zayan for Za, which means weapon. And if you take these three, how you have the three, that weapon with the three sticks, and then they're joined with chains, that's a weapon, a Zayan. Okay, then you have the Cha. You got the pronunciation here, Cha. That's like you're clearing your throat, Cha. Alright, but there's no word to describe it right now. Then you have the Ta, Alright, there goes the pronunciation ta. Then you have the ya. Now the ya, which the pronunciation here ya comes from the Hebrew word yad, which means hand. And there's a certain way you can hold your hand and look at it, and you can see that it's talking about the hand. So like I said again, when Adam was given the job of naming everything, whatever he named everything, that's what the name of it was. So that's when he looked at the hand, he called it ya or yad. So that's the Hebrew word for hand. Alright, the next one is the letter ka. Here's a pronunciation ka, which is from the Hebrew word kap, which means palm of hand. Now this one is a little different than the one that we have. The one that we have is more like a half circle, and then you have this sort of V looking thing in the middle of it. Okay, and that would be kap, which is the palm of the hand. And when you look at the palm of your hand, you can see it's like it's circular. So you can see that it looks similar to the letter if you had the half round circle around it. So that the word ka, or the letter ka, comes from the Hebrew word kap, which means palm of hand. Right. The next one, la, pronunciation la, comes from the Hebrew word lamad, which means to learn. Okay, it's like a coiled up snake. As you can see it, it's like a coiled up snake. All right. The next one is ma, which you get the pronunciation ma, which the letter ma comes from the Hebrew word mayam, which means water. And then you notice, if you look at the way that the letter is constructed, it kind of looks like waves in the water. If you kind of look at it from the side, or you look at the water from the side, you'll see the waves coming in. That's what the Hebrew character ma is, from mayam, which means water. Now you got the letter na, pronunciation na, and there's no meaning for it. Some people say it means fish, but there's no, the word fish doesn't come from the word na. It comes from the word dag, D-A-G. Right, the word fish comes from the word dag, which means fish. So I don't know where they got that from, but that's what they say. So that's why I tell you, brother, some of these letters don't have the whole meaning to it. So that's why the scripture say we prophesy in part. When the kingdom is established, we'll know everything perfectly, meaning that we'll know whatever is missing, whatever we, like I'll give you a quick example. Like in the book of Revelation, the 10th chapter, when the seven thunders uttered their voices, John was getting ready to write it down, but the Lord said, no, don't write that down. The angel told him, don't write that down. Why? Because it's a mystery for now, but in the kingdom we'll know that mystery. Alright, so the next letter is the letter sa. Here goes a pronunciation sa, which comes from the Hebrew word samak, which means support. And if you look at it, it's almost like you can see almost like a clothesline, where people used to hang clothes on. So it's like a support. Okay, so the word sa comes from the Hebrew word samak, which means support. The next letter I, which here's the pronunciation I, comes from the Hebrew word ayun, which means eye. And if you look at it, it looks like an eye. And if you just put the little dot in the middle of it, you'll have the pupil, so then you have the eye. All right, that's what the Hebrew character I means. It comes from the Hebrew word ayun, which means eye. Now the next letter is a pa, pronunciation pa, comes from the Hebrew word pa, which is actually two words, pa, or two letters, pa, ha, but they're joined together, so the word is pa, for mouth. All right, and if you look at it, and if you look at somebody's mouth, especially from a side angle, open or gaping open mouth, you would see that that's where the pa came from. All right, so that's it means mouth. All right, the next word, or the next letter, is tazah. Here goes the pronunciation tazah. There's no meaning for it. The next letter is qua, pronunciation qua right here. There's no meaning for it. The next letter is a ra. You got the ra pronunciation, which comes from the Hebrew word ra'ash, which means head. Now if you look at it, it looks like a head. This is supposed to be the head, and then you got the neck here. Alright, so that's the head and that's the neck. So Ra'ash or Ra comes from the Hebrew word Ra'ash, which means head. Now the Hebrew character Shah, which the pronunciation here Shah, comes from the Hebrew word Shun, which the Hebrew word Shun means tooth. Now if you look at the Shah, and if you were to put a half circle on the top of it, it would look like an actual tooth or a molar. Alright, that's where you get the Hebrew word. That's what the Hebrew character Shah comes from the Hebrew word Shun, which means tooth. And then the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet, or the Lashawan Qadash alphabet, is the Tha. Pronunciation Tha comes from the Hebrew word Thawa, which means sign. It also means cross. It also means end. And if you turn this a certain way, you will see the upright cross. Alright, because that's the sign of the end. It's the last letter in the Hebrew character. It's also a cross. Alright, so that pretty much covers the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, or the Lashawan Qadash. Like I said, if you write them out, there's a certain way you can write them out so you can actually see. If for instance, if I was to put the point down on the letter I, you would see it's a cattle head. So there's a certain way you can draw on these and show that they're what their origins are, what they mean. Alright, so with that, I hope you brothers learned something. Like I said, it's a short lesson, a beginner's lesson. I hope you learned something, and with that I say shalom.